You're listening to Earful of Dirt, the Major League Rugby podcast. We're live each Monday night on YouTube, available for download every Wednesday morning through your favorite podcast provider, and always online at earfulofdirt.com. Bringing you the latest news, views, and reviews from across the United States. Here's your hosts. And we're live. Welcome to Earful of Dirt, the Major League Rugby podcast. I'm Corey Munson, coming to you live from Iowa. I'm joined, as I am every week, by Aaron Castro in Arizona, and our new co-host, happy to introduce, Liam Madigan-Freed in Massachusetts. Hey guys, how was your break?
Oh, it was pretty good. There's a lot of stuff that I think we all did. I guess the most recent stuff is I spent some time in Texas on my trip to Waco for a football game because the boss is a Baylor alum. Did mix in some business. Did not go to the Austin Combine, but I did sit down and talk with Thierry Dopon, head coach Alan Yarde, and their marketing and sponsorship, I think, guru would be the best way to say it. But I think it's VP of Marketing Sponsorship, Mike Ablay. So did that this weekend. I guess we'll share some of that stuff. But Liam, what about you?
It was pretty good, pretty uneventful. I've pretty much just been working construction the entire time. But I am a college graduate now, so that's definitely good. And I'm ready to work until I die.
Well, I think the rest of us are right there with you, Liam. Welcome. For those of you guys new to the podcast, this is the start of season 2. We made it, everybody. Woo! So we do this each and every Monday night. We discuss news and rumors from Major League Rugby. That's the United States Professional Rugby Union. It's our chance to look at the issues, to hear from the league and players, as well as team leadership, as well as checking in with our friends from across the USA rugby scene. With all that said, Aaron, I think you're going to fill us in on what we got going on this week.
All right. Well, as you can see, we've realigned. Dan Brown has, said that he doesn't have time for us because he's a businessman. He's starting his own gig. So good for him. And he's still remaining, as you can see on our website. He is an advisor to the show, so we will try to bring him back in as much as possible. Liam Madigan is my new co-host. And we've got some other news that we'll talk about, hopefully our next episode that shows a platform realignment. But really, let's get into Major League Rugby. So, MLR 2020 expansion, 2019 update. Transactions and reallocations. Really hard to call that a draft. We'll briefly talk about, Arrows Raptors exhibition match in Ontario. If you haven't seen it, it is on Facebook in the Ontario Arrows video section on their Facebook page. And, of course, we'll get to your questions with some Q&A from Bob and not just from Bob. But Atlanta and Boston.
So, one question that I've been asked now a couple of times is, am I going to be switching my allegiance to Boston? However, I think all of us at this point can kind of say that we've been covering the league for a substantial enough amount of time that, we don't really root for anybody anymore. Like we might have some teams that with players who we like and respect a bit more than others. But at this point, I kind of like to see everybody do well. And as much as I like to root for the region, I think at this point I'll be pretty clear in my unbiased reporting of the Boston team. Wink, wink.
It's good to see that market. It's sort of, I guess, it really alleviates some of the travel that New York would have had to endure over time, I guess. But, it's a natural sporting rivalry, and you get the Northeast. Some people think that Mystic is a lot stronger than they are, but just pointing out that they won the national championship with a losing record. Not as good as 2016 when they crushed it, though. That was a dream season for Josh Smith, I think.
I think that speaks a lot to Josh Smith's coaching ability, and especially the fact that Mystic went through a big sort of, I don't want to say, like overturn, but they brought in a lot of new younger players. Ian Luciano being one of those people. He's a great scrum half who has a huge ceiling, and he's going to be doing great things, especially when Boston MLR comes along. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the Boston Free Jacks and the kind of people that Boston has the ability to put on that roster.
What's a Free Jack?
So a Free Jack, as some people watching the podcast might know, the Union Jack is another name for the British flag, and so the Free Jack, I guess, is sort of the inverse of that. However, I've spoken with some more learned people on the subject, and it's something that they haven't really heard of, except for a few scholarly articles that make some mention of it. I haven't found a ton of info on the term.
Yeah, so I have no idea, but I do like their two logos that they got going on. But what else is going on in Boston? Who do you know that's behind Boston? I figured out some stuff about Atlanta.
So right now we're looking at Alex Magleby. I've only been calling him Alex Mags for the last couple of weeks. However, from what I've heard from my source,
Liam, it is Mags or Alex Magleby.
Alex Magleby. But anyway, from what my sources have been telling me, he's spearheading this project along with some other Dartmouth alumni who have some deep pockets in order to finance the whole thing. So it looks like it's coming from a pretty good base of operations. However, the big thing that people are going to have to keep an eye on is the logistics of how this organization is going to be run, because that can be its one downfall. I believe Boston has the ability to put there. I believe they have the people to financially back it, but as a lot of people have been kind of worried about, how is the logistics going to work, especially in a very expensive city like Boston, where getting field time and getting players housing might be an issue.
I think we're starting to see with Boston. I wouldn't even say a bit of, people talk about the Rugby United New York approach. Well, they just launched the brand, and you have, I think it's even more of a united approach than Rugby United is concerned, because it's just different, because people knew who James Kennedy was, whereas people probably know who's involved in the Boston MLR stuff, but it's been like it's been pretty quiet. Like, I want to say, we started hearing rumblings about a Boston MLR franchise
It's quiet. I think the term methodical might be better, because you haven't heard, other than Dave Rodinsky coming out with an attempt to bring MLR to Boston about a year and a half ago. It's other than that attempt to bring MLR to Boston. We have our own group chat, and Aaron likes to make funny comments, so I should just tell that to the viewers watching right now. But the people in Boston have been working progressively towards this, and it hasn't been anything that's been far-fetched or just thrown out there, hoping it would catch fire. It's been something that a lot of people in the city have been working towards to make sure that this is something that can be a successful venture. Unlike, what's looking like for some other clubs in the league landscape. Sorry, I have something in my throat.
Mm. Yeah, so that's good to hear. I don't have any concerns as Alex Magleby as the person, but as long as he's moving to take over and set up and be DOR of Boston MLR franchise, that's fine. Otherwise, it's like you can't have your high performance director being the director of rugby for one franchise, if that makes sense, because I'm not going to say he plays favorites, because I don't think he does, but it leads to a conflict personally. But I think, that gives you an extremely smart guy who knows rugby, who knows how to create an attacking style to select players over time that, will be I'm just sad green is not their color.
Really?
Well, he's a Dartmouth guy.
I was kind of, I know, but I just unless you're the Celtics, I don't think green is a real, Boston color. I was like, I know the Irish heritage might suggest it, but I've always kind of seen it, as a blue and white city, which actually happen to be the two actual official colors of the country of Ireland. This is, a very lesser known fact that green, white, orange are not in fact the official colors of Ireland.
Oh.
I didn't know that. I also have no way of checking that, so we're just going to go ahead and assume it's true.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to Atlanta, this is, I'd heard that there were two groups in Atlanta a while ago looking at this and that they were on complete opposite sides of the spectrum, and I think it's a different one than the one I was first thinking being in the strong power. But guess what? I know Phil Holmes had gone on Rugby Wrap-Up and talked about Obetz, Ohio. Well, guess who is behind the Atlanta franchise?
Tiger Rugby. Who is that, Aaron?
Tiger Rugby. Tiger Rugby. So James Walker.
To everything.
Yeah. James Walker and co. They closed down their residence facility in Ohio last year and moved Tiger Rugby's operations actually to the Atlanta area, which I found out when Tiger went to Rugby Town Sevens this year. So you've got former Eagle Phil Teal as a coach with one of the clubs down in Atlanta. So that's really cool. So you've got some high performance coaches behind a new franchise down there. They just launched their website. So if you've spent the entire weekend wondering where the Atlanta MLR website is, it's up. They are a little behind the Boston New England Free Jacks, but they've got a year to get all that stuff ready, right?
So if you would like to find that link directly, you can go to the rugby page. That link is available somewhere on the homepage.
So,
yeah. So the other thing I think we wanted to hit on, guys, is now that we've got Atlanta and Boston in the mix, what's going on with some of these other teams we've been talking about? We've had talks about Rooney, we've got Arrows, we've had LA Coast, DC MLR. Any updates on all of these guys?
Well, New York is in. They're on the website. You've got their little shield up. The Arrows, there's some cross-border issues to get through, I think. And from what I understand, when the schedule is announced, they will announce Ontario as a member of the league. It's got to be done because I saw Bill Webb at the New York sponsorship event with the deputy commissioner and the commissioner, Dean Howes and Nick Benson were there, and they had Ontario Arrows hats. So,
which are fresh, by the way. If you've seen those online, their color scheme is like, ooh.
If you could send some hats to EOD, we would gladly, rep them on the set.
100%.
Nickelback to send their hat, I wear it.
But as far as DC and LA are concerned, I got nothing. Everything seemed really good in high summer, and everyone's kind of stopped talking, and which is sort of sad because DC had 1,000 season ticket deposits at the end of July. So
that whole situation is very confusing to me. And I mean, my assumption would be that, especially with DC having a strong showing, that they would want to maybe they're just trying to get their ducks in the row, and they are looking at a 2020 entry, or that would be my hope anyway. Just because that's a lot of deposits, and I mean, are they going to take it and run with it? I can't imagine that would happen. So
turns out Doug is actually just running the DCMLR team. It was a scam the whole time.
Well,
so I guess that kind of puts us at a to recap. That's good for Rooney. That's good for Arrows, and we're just kind of up in the air about the other two. So yeah, we've had a few questions on that over the last few weeks. I guess that's what we knew, guys.
Sorry, Corey. I think we'd be remiss, though, to not address the San Diego club isn't entirely happy with the fact that MLR decided to let in an LA club and thus fan base. So there's been some unsubstantiated rumors that that San Diego is really trying. No, I shouldn't trying their hardest an LA bid to enter the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've heard a lot of this stuff, and there's been talk of development for where San Diego Legion want to put their eventual ground, which they're talking about starting to build in the next 2 years, and they want to build in North County, and where the LA Coast were going to play would have been, an hour away. And, it is what it is, but there are other places in LA to play. And if that was really a sticking point, just move to Fullerton. Fullerton has some nice grass.
Mm-hmm. Try to grab some real estate out in Carlsbad or something like that. Did building a stadium out in the middle of the suburb.
So, moving on to, we're not really going to, I guess, flush these out like we had done last year because there's just so many, but let's just talk transactions for New York. Player-wise, they've announced Ben Foden, Cathal Marsh, Dylan Fawcett, and Seamus Kelly. Staff-wise, we've got James English as GM, Mike Tolkien as head coach, Keys Lensing as forwards coach, and if Rugby Rama is correct, Pierre Arnauld as CEO.
What do you guys think about those names?
Well, the name that excites me the most is definitely Mike Tolkien. I think that degree, somebody like him with the degree of professionalism and the experience on the national stage can only be beneficial. But I also think him going into Rooney, which is probably a smaller atmosphere than being with the national, to be able to handle the team and be a lot more involved, especially concerning some of the complaints that were happening national teams. This is definitely a good thing for Mike Tolkien to be brought in. Otherwise, with like Dylan Fawcett, absolute beast when he was playing last season for Glendale, I believe, and we knew that he was going to be going back, so that's not that big of a surprise. So I think he's going to be the quote unquote face of that franchise going forward.
Yeah, he earned the captaincy during their exhibition season before he went on loan to Glendale. So I don't think that they were going to let him go, And Seamus Kelly, sort of an expectation because he was playing with Nyack and big name there, Eagle, and local guy in finance, Cathal Marsh, really I can't wait to see him play because he'll be the best fly half in the league. We're talking about a guy that was earning starts at Leinster, and he got the cut. Could have easily gone to France, gotten a great payday, and for some reason, and I think he's 26, 27, he decided to come to the United States. So we're talking about a guy that will tear it up in the league. And Ben Foden, I mean, he's still dirty. Still dirty. And so they've got a nice little core that they're starting to build.
Well, and I think this is reminiscent. Well,
go right ahead, Corey. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, no problem. I was just going to say, I think this is reminiscent of kind of the lead into season, the first season of MLR too, where there was a lot of rumors flying around for a lot of time, and it really wasn't, not everything was locked down and solidified till honestly about a month out from the start. So in that instance, we're really looking at, December before we know for sure who's going to land where and what we're looking at. So Liam, you had something else you wanted to say about this, though?
Cannot even remember. But however, I was going to make a comment that Rugby United New York, there was this sentiment even before the official MLR season began, that exhibition season, that they were a team that could be competitive even if they had entered the league, right at that stage. So agreeing with what Aaron said, they have their good, own little core, and I think Rugby United New York is definitely going to be a team that has the potential to win the East, this season, as much of an East division as MLR could possibly have.
Sounds so good. Moving on, let's talk what has been called a draft by several GMs. It's interesting trying to get this out of people. So I call it. I had to go to Texas to get it out of people. But I talked to several GMs about this, and I guess it was just something that they needed to do to sort of level the playing field. But with a player reallocation, Liam, do you think that this really makes coaching an important piece? Like, it's forcing coaches to get better. The draft, specifically.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's going to make coaching that much more important, but I believe the reason is that you're not going to have players who are so regionally oriented who are going to be as familiar with each other. Games that we saw last year came in with a high degree of chemistry just because of playing with each other. So kind of like you said, this is going to be an experiment that's going to try and level the playing field, and coaches are going to need to know how to adapt to players who are going to be coming in from different backgrounds, from different rugby cultures, and they're going to need to know how to assimilate that into a culture that, if you think about it, they're only just sort of creating, because this new professional atmosphere in the United States with rugby is totally new to everybody. So coaches are going to be the ones who have to be the focal point of creating that.
Yeah. So as far as if I've got all the ducks in a row, which it's taken like 7 conversations to get all the details, and I don't even think I have all of them. What it was is, so all of the full-time players and player coaches are on national contracts that are through the league, and so are associate player contracts are through the league as well. But basically, depending on who you've talked to, it's either all associate players and senior All-American graduates, or even some full-time players were entered into the draft. We really don't know who was picked. We know one, Alex Elkins, has moved to Austin. He was in some Austin kit just yesterday. But, it's interesting, right? But we've already seen some players elect not to return. And I don't know if the draft was part of it, but it definitely could have, because then you're sort of forcing some of these players in certain markets to move to a market where cost of living is just so much higher. And
exactly,
again, and so
well, going to make the point, Aaron, is that, just like you said, is that the cost of living between some of these cities is just ridiculous. I've been recently getting ready to make a move to Houston in the next couple of months, and the housing are astronomically lower than Boston, and even compared to San Diego. So, do players have a choice of leaving their original club and going to another to enter the draft, or is it like, well, you don't want to enter the draft and you're shit out of luck? And that's just what that's what the league hasn't been clear about, and I don't understand why there can't be clear parameters released to the public and to the media.
Yeah, I would certainly love a fact sheet because I like I said, depending on who you talk to, the details are a little bit different. But I think some of the players, if they're not drafted or if they elect not to enter the draft, I think that they're allowed to play next season, but there is a number of matches that have to take place before they're allowed to be re-signed by any team. Because that's sort of the only thing that would make sense. Because, we've had players already leave and not want to be a part of the draft.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing I can – but, again, it's interesting and it's confusing. But the sort of can't wait to see what the major moves are.
That's definitely something to look forward to, is what are the major moves going to be. However, how much potential is there, or what's the highest ceiling for what a major move is going to be if the de facto free agency period of Major League Rugby is so restrictive in terms of what a player can actually do to sign with another team? I talked with some players during the offseason, players from a few different teams saying they had preliminary talks about other contracts with other teams before eventually deciding to sign back with their original club. And so I think there is a vague sort of freedom with players to try to find a new team. But other than that, though, from what we've been saying about this draft, especially with part-time players or those fringe roster players, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of choice if you want to go out and seek a better contract or a better deal or a better opportunity at getting playing time.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting because part of that conversation I had with Austin this weekend is that you're going to look at their roster, and it's going to look so different from last season. Getting names, even though, we're having beers and just having a chat. And, of course, they told me what I could say and what I can't. But I want to say they're only bringing back a third of their roster. So I think something like 14 players is what they're bringing back from last season. And a lot of that has to do with Coach Alan Yarde now being fully a part of the recruitment process. And the other part is the draft.
Well, Austin's one of those teams, though, that I think there was a lot of, I don't want to call it displeasure, but I think they were left wanting more after last season because they had those great games against teams like San Diego. They nearly came up with a victory over Glendale. And so I think Coach Allen is going to have to, he's going to have to try to figure something out and to do differently to try to unlock that massive amount of potential that Austin has with people like Hanko Hammerscheis and stuff like that. How's my hair?
Oh, it's been cut.
Yeah, I know, right? But that's what happens when you go to the barbershop tipsy. You're just like, keep cutting. I want to look like Macklemore.
So,
boy, I was going to say, Liam, watch out for the tattoo parlor then if that's a problem. Hair will grow back. Tattoos are forever, man.
So moving on.
You should see my back, dude.
It's just a huge Christina Aguilera face.
And it's a good one, too.
True story. Yeah. True story. I have a tattoo of a platypus chilling in a tree on my back. That's like 100% true.
Okay. Platypus chilling in a tree.
Things you do when you're 18.
Yeah.
So next week on Tattoos with Liam.
All right. So Ontario versus Glendale. Do you get a chance to catch that, Liam?
Yeah, actually. So when I was watching it, I went into the game just, almost from muscle memory, just expecting Glendale to win. But as the game sort of went on, and don't get me wrong, I know this wasn't a full 100% roster for either team, especially for the Ontario Arrows. But I felt like the mechanics weren't the problem for Glendale. It was the execution, I guess you could say. Just something felt very rusty and immobile about the way they tried to attack this game. And I think Ontario just sort of played obviously a much more better rounded game than compared to Glendale. And I don't think this is necessarily a foreshadowing of what Glendale is going to look like next season. I still saw some of those issues that we were seeing towards the playoffs and eventually in the championship versus the Seawolves.
I don't, as far as the names are concerned, they had a lot of new players, and I think they're going to have a lot of new players throughout their squad. Just, they had some older guys retire. We're still kind of wondering if Zach Fenolio is coming back because, well, let's just say when it comes to orthopedic sales, he is one of the rock stars in this country for Stryker Orthopedics. Stryker Orthopedics, I have a plate on my collarbone from you. So sponsor the show. Thank you. But so he's debating on different pieces because he wants to again move forward with his career. Although you got to say, like, he's an informed player, whether it's at 6 or at 2 this season. He's got to be pushing for a call up back into that 5-match series that we have, the ARC, in the winter, to see if he could possibly make the World Cup if that's what he wants. But I don't know. We still haven't heard. But so I think if they had won, he would have. The decision was made and he was going to retire. But it's still up in the air right now. Someone asked me what the line I was gonna put, what the line I'd put on it. I was like, they're gonna play better. They're gonna play pretty well. I think they're gonna look decent, and I think they did look decent. But the line I put on it, which was pretty close, Ontario ended up being better than the line I put on it. I said Ontario by -15 because that's most of their squad, and they reinforced it with Canadian international prop. Cedars Justice Euro, and a few other players were on that roster to beat also. And Glendale, for the most part, looked competent with, I think they had 8 new guys. But they had 8 new guys. That's how they played.
Exactly. And that when it comes down to it, that's more than half of a starting squad. And rugby is a game of chemistry. It's a consistently moving game. There's a lot of passing and stuff like that. Like, listen to me explaining the game. But when you have 8 new guys, that's 8 new different personalities and styles of playing that you need to get used to and you need to start to gel with, especially when it comes to areas like the scrum or in the very back of the back line.
Yeah, my only concern is this is 2 exhibition losses for Glendale. They dropped a match to the College All-Americans, and now they've dropped the one to the Arrows. And so I'm just a little worried about what the impression that is giving off about the team, especially going into the next season.
Well,
I'm not worried.
I'm not worried based on the collegiate All-American game. Maybe I know Coach Williams was mad, but to be honest, I don't know if they took that game seriously because, well,
they were playing a bunch of college kids.
They were playing a bunch of college kids, but Will McGee and Sean Davies just got off the plane from vacation 2 days before. So if the core of that squad that went out there was, on vacation, because in reality, they'd only had about 6 weeks off. That's not an off season to recharge after going through that ringer. What do they need? They probably need some more prop depth, and they definitely need some locks with losing the likes of Ben Landry. We really didn't get to see what Landry could do for them because after their first game, he was suspended for 3 matches, and then he went straight into the Eagles pool.
I think you also need to take all of these exhibition games, just like the NFL preseason, with a grain of salt. You know, a lot of these games are just meant about are just to kind of get the rust off of players, start to build that chemistry. I don't think Dave Williams is sat any of his players down to watch game film of all of the collegiate All-Americans entire roster. Prepare, you gotta prepare for this game. Everything means so much. It's like, no, it was just going out, practicing rugby, and then getting on the field to try to shake some of the rust off. So if they're not game planning, if they're
that was a great Dave Williams impression.
One episode in this entire season, I will impersonate Dave Williams at least once.
It's like a
promise to our viewers.
So yeah, it's not locks and props is sort of the answer to if someone asks me what teams need in this league, it's locks and props, because locks aren't growing on trees in the collegiate game. Most of them are all like 4.6s, and what does that mean is you're looking at a hybrid number 4, number 6. I guess the best way to explain it is look at Brendan Daly, who's in the Eagles select squad for the APC down in Uruguay. He is a hybrid 4.6, and that is the same thing that Ben Landry is. He's a guy who can slot in at 4, and he's a guy who can slot in at 6. We're not seeing a lot of natural 5s, the Charlie Hewitts of the world, right? And I talk to every coach and I say, are you going to the college and talking to the power forward who's 6'8" or 6'6"? Are we doing the recruiting there? Because I think it's going to happen, especially in Glendale and now in San Diego, because you've got two international locks that came from basketball backgrounds. Scott Murray, the new forwards coach for San Diego, is international. I think it's like Scotland number 925 is, he came from basketball. Luke Gross, the Glendale Merlins Division I head coach and WPL head coach for Glendale, and the lineout coach for the Raptors was also an NCAA basketball player. So they're gonna go find those guys. But is anyone else looking for the crossover athlete at lock? Because guess what? There aren't that many coming through the system that size in the collegiate game right now.
I think in terms of recruiting and scouting, it's a whole different thing. But I think in terms of what people already have right now, if you look at the SaberCats, they one of the reasons their scrum was so successful this season is the size of a ton of those guys is absolutely off the chain right now. Like you had Elkins, who unfortunately left at the end of the season. You had Mullen, who left for the Newcastle Falcons at the end of this season, who wasn't the tallest, thick. And you had just a mix of other guys who were all Allen, of course, is another lad who was approaching like 6'5", 6'6". There was a ton of size, and thus there was a ton of leverage
Justin
inside
Allen
that scrum.
is 6'10".
Exactly. I mean, he was pretty freaking tall when I met him. And so as my mentor Grant Cole says, you got to have those big uglies in the engine room in order to get that scrum rolling. And that's that was proven when the SaberCats scrum was probably the highlight of their entire season last year.
Yeah. But I think, is it that time?
Oh, I think it's that time. So every week, it's that time. So yeah, take a drink, take a breath, get ready, because it's time for questions from Bob. All right. So every week we get questions from our Reddit community. So you guys can find us on Reddit. We're hanging out and moderating there at reddit.com/r/mlrugby. And these are the questions that come up from that forum. And usually we ask for them. Sometimes we don't, and sometimes you just send them to us. Any way we get them, we appreciate it. So Starting us off for tonight, Russ the Man 16 wants to know, are there any updates on Vancouver?
I've got nothing from anyone, and in fact, when it comes to my contacts regarding two of the bids, it just seems dead in the water for me.
Yeah.
It is a targeted market for Canadian expansion. The league wants Vancouver because of how strong the local rugby is.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I have a pretty shallow pool of contacts north of the border, but from things that I've heard, it's just been something that's been talked about. Everybody likes to talk about how strong the BC Union is and how many butts they put in seats, but at the same time, with Seattle right there across the Sound, I think that region has been sort of taken care of, and I don't think that Vancouver, should they start a club, is going to see that significant of an increase in fans over the Seattle Seawolves. So, yeah, I think this is a in the water, unless they get the investors. Getting the investors and getting the logistics together is half the battle, and until they do that, then I don't even think it's worth a huge conversation.
Whoa. No one from Vancouver is going to Seattle games, man. Especially with the way our border's like tighter than a chastity belt right now. You got to process that passport. It's crazy. But really, we're talking, if you drive, it's much further than San Diego to Los Angeles.
Yeah, the only reason, for God's sakes, I mean, I went to school in Vermont, and I met Canadians who drove 5 hours to go to Jay Peak, at the Vermont border every weekend. So I've seen a lot crazier things done by those Canucks.
Well, going to Montreal for the weekend is always a great time.
You have no idea.
All right.
I can honestly say I've never
done horrible things.
I've never been to Canada. I've never had the pleasure of visiting our friends to the north. I might have to try that someday. So, on that note,
we're talking about it. Shout out to Bishop's Rugby, a great group of guys at that college, a great group of rugby players, and I still love you guys.
Very good. So next up is our namesake, Bob B. Boberson wants to know, is the league doing a neutral location for playoffs and finals again this year? What do you guys think?
Not for the playoffs. For the finals, yes.
I think that's the best way to do it too, is because playoff, even in the MLL, MLL, MLS, and NFL, it's all home and away playoff games. Whereas championship game, I think that's the best way to do it, especially to get a bunch of neutral people as many neutral people in the seats as possible to make sure it's a fair game and stick to what works in sports. You know what I mean?
Yeah, makes sense. Next up, Milk Steak Connoisseur wants to know, how seriously do you take the rumors that Tiger Rugby is establishing a Columbus area team? And I kind of feel like we hit on this a minute ago.
And I think a Columbus-based team would be cool, especially considering the Ohio Aviators had a cool thing going with the Fortress, and he ended up building a stadium for the Ohio Machine that was originally supposed to be shared with the Ohio Aviators. But at this point, I think the league is kind of moving away from the idea of Columbus being involved, especially after that they're associated with PRO at this point. Nobody wants that.
I look at Columbus as a weird market. It's got enough people. Especially when the crew leave for Austin, they won't have any major franchise unless you consider the Ohio State University as a major franchise. But, Cleveland is where you want to go. Shout out to Rugby City Podcast for being from the land. Terrence Kilbane, great friend of the show. But I mean, so I've heard it two ways. Tiger Rugby is behind the Atlanta franchise, and Paul Holmes still wants a franchise in Ohio? Don't know.
Aaron, let me ask you this. Who do you think is more likely to take the crown of the first like true Midwest team? Do you think it's going to be Chicago, Columbus, or somebody like the Blues?
So
The Blues being St. Louis for those that don't know.
It's interesting to see where the Chicago Lions, which is I would say the most well-supported team in the Midwest rugby union. And it's really hard to know because they've just established a women's 15s program with the intent of establishing a WPL team to so that you have a team in North Shore still there and a Chicago Lions women's WPL team, so you don't have to fly anywhere, at least for one game during the season. But if they're going that way, it makes me think that they're going away from the MLR project. There really hasn't been much talk out of Chicago. The interesting team to think about would be St. Louis.
Only those who have been following the league for a while may remember Blues. I don't want to say the St. Louis Blues, but a sort of subsidiary from the club of the St. Louis Blues. They were supposed to have the league as one of the original teams.
Supposed to be Kansas City Blues. The St. Louis Blues are
Kansas City. I'm sorry. Yeah.
The St. St. Blues are the hockey team. St. Louis does have a Division I. St. Louis does have a Division I team in the Midwestern Premiership, but I think because the Rams are gone, right, and they just have a hockey team.
And shout out to Andrew.
Who I was freaking thinking of.
Shout out to Andrew over on YouTube for the correction there. Yeah, we're getting our blues confused for sure. All right. Next up, also from Milksteak, wants to know, after the walloping that the Collegiate All-Americans gave the Raptors this summer, are you concerned that colleges have a larger share of America's elite rugby talent than MLR has?
Yeah, no shit. I mean, I don't mean that like in an insulting way, but like right now, American collegiate rugby, it has the structure, it has the money, it has these coaches with pedigrees and who have established a culture. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to say that college currently probably holds a greater median of talent in the United States, but that doesn't concern me considering I want collegiate rugby to be successful. However, that tide is going to start turning with as MLR starts getting more and more popular and people start entering the league at younger and younger ages. So no, I'm not concerned, but I definitely think it's true to an extent.
I think we talked about throwing away that result, but I do think it said right there that there was enough talent in college rugby right now to have an effect on the league next year, that you would be able to raise standards with a lot of the senior class just based on, that limited sample size. Because there were only, I think, 8 or 9 graduating seniors in that All-American class that were at camp. Most of those were actually older sophomores and juniors. So I would say that there's plenty of talent in college rugby right now. The question will be not about kids entering the league that much earlier, because we haven't seen anyone except I think Devin Short. Devin Short and Jake Chrisman being the youngest guys in the league, a 19-year-old and a 20-year-old, just doing really good things. Devin Short, I mean, we're looking at a guy who can eventually, when he cracks the Eagles, be an Eagle for a very long time if he doesn't somehow get swiped by a French or English team. But this, I mean, we talked about this a lot last season, and I said eventually there's going to be a level of investment that allows the league's academies to surpass what college rugby can produce. But we're at an interesting place in the road, because if enough alumni for various colleges in the D1A model, it doesn't even have to be the D1A model. It can be an NSCRO. We can go varsity hardcore in NSCRO, right? And if the colleges and the alumni invest, they can be a part of the process that establishes rugby as a major sport in the United States. And because we're at the point right now where enough players are being developed to immediately make an impact. But if the college game doesn't invest in bringing in more quality coaches and having full-time staffs, they won't be able to develop the same thing 10 years from now, when each academy in the MLR has, 5 coaches in it, and they're working with kids at age grade from U16 up to U23 for the senior academy.
I think you could also parry that problem, though, with the fact that there might be more and more coaches available the more popular the MLR gets. For instance, with the West Houston Lions, they're actually encouraging many of their staff members to become certified coaches, just to as well as referees, just to add to the add to the pool of talent and options that the city of Houston in general has. So I think as clubs in their respective cities start to get more established and encourage programs like that, I think that will have some spillover into the college system.
I think we'll get out of here.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. If your question was not addressed on tonight's show, just hang tight. We'll try to answer them throughout the week, and maybe we'll pick up a few more for next week. So thank you guys so much for participating in Questions from Bob. All right. So does anybody have any final thoughts before we head out this evening?
So I spoke to Ryan Fitzgerald of NOLA today, and he said, we're going to start making a ton of announcements, so hold on to your seat. So if you're a NOLA fan, you got news.
That is good news.
I definitely like NOLA. They're always a good club to follow. But in terms of my final thoughts, though, not so much regarding news about the MLR, but I just want to tell our fans all out there to get excited. Get excited about this season, because there is going to be good things coming. And not just to get excited about Major League Rugby, get excited about Earful of Dirt, because this blog is going to start taking over. This blog is going to start getting really good, and you guys are going to want to keep on tuning in. You got me, Liam Poach, and Aaron Castro, and then you got Corey right now. We're your favorite people. You guys need to keep tuning in, talk rugby with us, because we love to do it.
Our new hype man, everybody. Thank you, Liam.
Rock right.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Thank you, everybody who tuned in on YouTube, and everybody who's going to be downloading this episode on Wednesday. We really appreciate the support. A little bit about us. Be sure to tune into the show every Monday night. We are live on YouTube, and then it's available for download every Wednesday morning from your favorite podcast provider. If you like what we do, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our iTunes feed. That helps us get our message out to other folks. So be sure to subscribe there. And be sure to share your news, views, and abuse with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're on all those platforms under Earful of Dirt. That's it for me. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hope you have a wonderful week. We'll be back next Monday. Take care.